think it just happens. That moment when someone says something and you react. You think it's random. You think it's just how people are. But what if it's not? What if that moment wasn't an accident? What if it was expected? Think about it. How many times has it happened where someone says something small, something subtle, and somehow it gets a reaction out of you? Not a big reaction. Not always. Sometimes it's just a shift in your tone, a slight change in your expression, a different kind of energy, but it's there. And the moment it happens, something changes. The dynamic shifts. You feel it. That sense that you've been pulled into something you didn't fully choose. And the strange part is, you don't question it, you just respond. You react. And then later, when everything is over, you think about it. You replay it, and you start asking yourself, why did I react like that? Why did that bother me so much? Why did I give that moment so much attention? But you're asking the wrong question. The real question isn't, why did I react? The real question is, why did they say that in the first place? Because most of the time, it's not random. People don't always communicate directly. They don't always say exactly what they mean. Sometimes they test. Sometimes they provoke. Not in an obvious way. Not aggressively, subtly, through tone, through timing, through small comments that seem harmless on the surface but carry something underneath. And if you're not aware of it, you fall into it every time. Because the moment you react, you give them something. Information, confirmation, control. Not complete control, but enough. Enough to understand how you respond. Enough to see what affects you. Enough to predict your behavior in similar situations. And once that happens, the interaction is no longer equal. Because now they know something about you. Something you didn't choose to reveal. They know what gets to you. And once someone knows that, they don't need to guess anymore. They can guide the situation. They can push a little further or step back, depending on what they want. And this doesn't mean everyone is doing it intentionally. Some people are, others aren't. But the effect is the same, because whether it's conscious or not, your reaction creates a pattern. And patterns can be used. That's why certain people seem to get under your skin so easily. It's not because they're stronger, it's because they've seen your pattern. They've seen how you respond. And once they understand that, they don't need to do much, just enough to trigger the same response again, and you follow it. Not because you want to, but because it feels automatic. And that's where most people lose. Not because they're weak, but because they're predictable. Because once your reaction becomes predictable, it becomes controllable. And the moment something becomes controllable, you're no longer fully in charge of it. You think you're responding, but you're being guided. You think you're expressing yourself, but you're following a pattern. And the worst part is, it feels justified. It feels like you had no choice, like you had to respond. Like staying silent would have been wrong. But what if that's the illusion? What if the moment you felt like you had to react was the moment you were already being controlled? Think about it. If someone can make you react without forcing you, without touching you, without doing anything obvious, just by saying something or acting a certain way, then who's really in control in that moment? You or them? And this is where things start to shift. Because once you see this clearly, you stop seeing reactions as random. You start seeing them as signals. Signals of influence. Signals of influence. Signals that something in you can be triggered. And once you see that, you can't ignore it anymore. You start noticing patterns. Not just in yourself, in others. You see how people test each other. How they push slightly and wait. How they say something and observe. How they don't just listen, they watch. And once you start seeing that, you realize something important. Not every interaction is neutral. Not every comment is innocent. Not every moment is accidental. Some are designed to see how you respond. And once you respond, you've already answered. Not with your words, with your behavior. And behavior is what people trust, not what you say, what you do. And if what you do is reactive, then that's what they learn. That's what they expect. That's what they use. And the cycle continues again and again and again until you see it, until you stop it, until you realize it's not about them anymore. It's about you. About whether you continue the pattern or break it. Because the moment you see what's happening, you're no longer inside it. You're looking at it. And when you can see something clearly, you don't have to follow it. You can choose. And that choice starts with one simple question. Not what should I say, but why did they say that? Once you start asking that question, why did they say that? Everything begins to shift. Because now you're no longer focused only on your reaction. You're looking at the situation itself. And when you do that, you begin to notice something subtle. People don't always communicate to express. Sometimes they communicate to observe. They say something and then they wait, not just for your words, for your reaction, your tone, your body language, your energy, because that reaction tells them something more honest than anything you could say. It tells them where you stand, not logically, emotionally. And emotional information is powerful because it reveals what affects you, what gets under your skin, what shifts your behavior. And once someone sees that, they learn, not in a formal way, in a natural way. They adjust, they test again, maybe a little differently, maybe a little stronger. And each time, your reaction gives them more clarity, more data, more understanding. And this doesn't require bad intentions. It doesn't mean everyone is trying to manipulate you. It just means people respond to patterns. They notice what works, what creates movement, what gets a response, and they repeat it, sometimes unconsciously, sometimes unconsciously. But the mechanism is the same, because human interaction is built on feedback. You do something, you observe the result, and you adjust. And your reaction is feedback, clear feedback, immediate feedback, unfiltered feedback. Unfiltered feedback that tells the other person this works. And once something works, it gets used again. That's why certain comments repeat, certain behaviors repeat, certain patterns repeat, because they've already been confirmed by you, not intentionally, but through reaction. And this is where it becomes uncomfortable, because once you see this, you realize something deeper. You've been teaching people how to interact with you, not through what you say, through how you react. Every reaction is a signal. Every signal is a lesson, and every lesson shapes future behavior. So when someone pushes you in a certain way or says something that feels familiar, it's not always new. It's often a continuation. Pattern that's already been established, and the reason it continues is because it works, because it gets a reaction, and reaction is what keeps it alive. Take that away and the pattern starts to break. But as long as it's there, it reinforces itself again and again. And this is why some people seem to target you more than others, not because you're weaker, but because you're more responsive, more reactive, more predictable in certain situations, and predictability creates opportunity, not always intentionally, but naturally, because if someone knows how you'll respond, they can anticipate your behavior, they can guide the interaction, they can stay one step ahead, not because they're smarter, but because they've seen the pattern, and you've confirmed it. And once you understand that, you start seeing interactions differently. You stop focusing only on what's being said, and you start paying attention to why it's being said, the timing, the tone, the context, what happened before, what happens after, and you begin to notice something important. A lot of communication isn't direct, it's layered. There's what's being said, and then there's what's being tested, And if you only respond to the surface, you miss what's underneath. You react to the words, but ignore the intention. And that's where the trap is. Because the words are just the trigger. The real impact comes from how you respond to them. And once you respond emotionally, you've already stepped into the pattern. You've already given feedback. You've already shown your position without realizing it. And that's why awareness matters, not to control others, to understand the interaction, to see what's happening beneath the surface, so that you don't get pulled into it automatically. Because once you see the intention, the words lose some of their power. They don't hit the same way. They don't feel as personal. They don't trigger the same reaction. Because now, you're not just hearing what's being said. You're understanding why it's being said, and that creates distance, not emotional distance. Clarity. You're no longer inside the reaction. You're observing the situation. And in that observation, you stay in control. Not because you're forcing anything, because you're not being pulled. And that's the shift. From reacting to understanding, from following to choosing, from being influenced to being aware. And once that becomes your default, people feel it. Not because you say anything different, because you respond differently. Or sometimes you don't respond at all. And that absence of reaction changes the entire dynamic. Because now the feedback is gone. The signal is gone. The pattern has nothing to feed on. And when a pattern isn't reinforced, it starts to weaken. Slowly, subtly, but consistently. And that's how you break it. Not by fighting it, not by confronting it directly, but by not feeding it, by not reacting in the same way, by not giving it what it expects. And that's where control returns, not all at once, but enough for you to see clearly, enough for you to choose differently, enough for you to step out of something that used to feel automatic. And once you do that, even once, you realize something important. You were never as stuck as it felt. You were just following a pattern that you didn't see before. And now, you do. Once you start seeing the pattern, you begin to notice something deeper. It's not just that people say things and you react. It's how that reaction changes everything, not just in that moment, but in the entire dynamic. Because control doesn't always look like control. It doesn't always look like someone dominating a situation or forcing an outcome. Sometimes it looks like something much simpler, a shift, a small movement in your behavior, a change in your tone, a reaction that wasn't there before. And that shift is enough to alter the balance, enough to change who's leading the interaction, because the moment you react emotionally, you stop leading. You start following, not consciously, but naturally. Your focus narrows, your awareness drops. Your attention locks onto the trigger, and everything else fades. You're no longer seeing the full situation. You're inside it, responding to it. And that's where control slips, not because someone took it, because you moved out of it. And once you move out of control, someone else can move into it, not always intentionally, but effectively, because now they don't have to adjust to you. You're adjusting to them through your reaction, through your energy, through your behavior. And that's what emotional control really is. Not about controlling others, about controlling the direction of the interaction. And direction is shaped by who reacts and who doesn't. Think about any situation where tension exists. An argument, a disagreement, a moment of pressure. The person who reacts first changes the flow. They speed it up. They add emotion. They make it unstable. And once instability enters, control decreases. Because now, everything is moving faster. Decisions are made quicker. Words are said without thinking. And that creates openings for misunderstanding, for escalation, for loss of control. But the person who stays composed does the opposite. They slow it down. They create space. They keep the interaction stable. And stability is control. Because when things are stable, you can think, you can observe, you can choose. But when things are unstable, you react. And reaction removes choice. And once choice is gone, control is gone. That's why emotional control matters more than anything else. Not because it looks strong, because it keeps you in position. It keeps you aware. It keeps you from being pulled into something that you didn't choose. And this is where most people misunderstand strength. They think strength is responding, defending, pushing back. But real strength is staying in control of yourself when everything inside you is pushing you to react. Because that's the hardest thing to do. Not reacting when it's easy means nothing. Not reacting when it's difficult. That's where control is real. And once you experience that, you start to see something clearly. A lot of situations aren't about what's being said. They're about what's being triggered. And if you respond to the trigger, you miss the situation. You miss the context. You miss what's actually happening because you're focused on the emotion, not the interaction. And that's how control shifts. Quietly. Without force, without confrontation, just through reaction. And once you understand that, you start seeing emotional responses differently. Not as expressions, but as signals. Signals that something has been triggered. Signals that attention has been captured. Signals that control has shifted. And that awareness changes how you move. You don't rush to respond. You don't feel the same urgency. You don't get pulled as easily, because now you're watching the interaction instead of being consumed by it. And in that position, you stay in control, not by dominating, by not being moved. Because the less you are moved, the harder you are to control. Not impossible, but harder. And that changes everything, because now you're not reacting to every shift. You're deciding which shifts matter. Which moments deserve your attention, which situations require a response, and which ones don't. And that decision is what keeps you in control, not silence, not words, choice. And once you operate from that, you don't get pulled into unnecessary situations. You don't escalate things that don't need escalation. You don't give energy to things that don't deserve it. And that creates a different kind of presence, a controlled presence. One that doesn't move easily, one that doesn't react automatically, one that doesn't lose position just because something was said. And people feel that, they sense it, because it's different. It's not common. Most people react. Most people follow emotion. Most people get pulled into situations without realizing it. But when someone doesn't, it stands out, not loudly, subtly. And that subtle difference changes how interactions unfold. Because now, you're not part of the pattern. You're outside of it, observing it, understanding it, and choosing when to engage with it. And that's where control becomes real. Not something you claim, something you demonstrate. In how you move, in how you respond, in how you choose. And once you reach that point, you don't need to prove anything. Because your behavior already shows it. At some point, seeing the pattern isn't enough. Understanding it isn't enough. Because the real test doesn't happen when you're thinking about it. It happens in the moment, when something is said, when something is done, when that familiar feeling appears again. That same pressure, that same urge, that same pull to react. And in that moment, everything you understand gets tested. Because it's easy to stay calm when nothing is happening. It's easy to think clearly when there's no pressure. But when something hits you, when something touches that same place inside you, that's when the pattern tries to take over again. And it will, at first. Because it's been there for a long time. It's familiar. It's automatic. It doesn't disappear just because you understand it. It shows up the same way it always has. Fast, immediate, convincing, And for a second, it feels like nothing has changed, like you're about to react the same way again. But this is where something different can happen, not outside, inside. Because now you see it, you feel the urge, but you recognize it, you notice it forming, you catch it before it fully takes over. And that moment, that exact moment, is where the pattern can break. Not by force, not by suppressing what you feel, but by not moving with it immediately. By pausing, not a long pause, not something obvious, just enough to interrupt the automatic response. And that interruption is powerful because it changes the direction. Instead of going from trigger to reaction, you go from trigger to awareness. And that awareness creates space, a small space, but enough. Enough to ask yourself something different. Not what should I say, but do I need to react to this? And that question alone shifts everything. Because now you're not inside the emotion. You're observing it, you're looking at it, and when you look at something clearly, it loses some of its control over you. The urgency drops, the pressure softens, and suddenly you have options. Not just one automatic reaction. Multiple choices. You can respond, you can stay silent, you can redirect, you can disengage. And the important part is you're choosing, not reacting. And that choice, even if it's small, changes the outcome. Because now you're not feeding the pattern, you're interrupting it. And once you interrupt it, even once, something shifts. Not dramatically, subtly. The next time it happens, you notice it faster, you catch it earlier, you pause more naturally. And each time you do that, you weaken the old pattern. You make it less automatic, less dominant. And over time, that changes how you respond. Not because you're forcing control, but because the reaction itself is losing strength. But here's where most people go wrong. They think breaking the pattern means doing nothing, staying completely silent, avoiding everything. And that's not the goal, because silence alone is not control. Avoidance is not control. Real control is choosing your response, not removing it completely. There will be moments where you need to speak, moments where you need to respond, moments where staying silent isn't the right move. But the difference is you don't respond from emotion, you respond from awareness. You don't speak because you feel triggered, you speak because you've chosen to. And that difference changes everything. Because your words are no longer reactive, they're intentional, they're measured, they carry weight, not because they're louder, but because they're controlled. And people feel that, they notice it, because it's different. Most people speak from emotion, most people react instantly, most people don't pause. So when you do, it stands out, not as something dramatic, as something stable. And stability changes how people interact with you. Because now you're not easy to pull into emotional situations. You're not reacting the same way. You're not feeding the same patterns. And that forces a shift. Not because you demanded it, because you changed your behavior. And behavior is what shapes interaction. But this takes repetition. You won't get it right every time. There will be moments where you still react. Moments where the pattern takes over. Moments where you realize it too late. And that's part of it. That's how change works. Not perfectly, progressively. The goal isn't to never react again. The goal is to react less and choose more. To catch the pattern earlier, to pause more often, to stay in control longer. And over time, that becomes your default. Not reacting, choosing, not being pulled, staying grounded. And once that becomes consistent, the pattern doesn't disappear, it loses power. It no longer runs automatically. It no longer controls your behavior. It becomes something you can see and decide whether to follow or not. And that's the difference between being controlled and being aware, between reacting and choosing. And once you reach that point, you don't feel trapped in those moments anymore. You don't feel like you have to respond. You don't feel that same pressure because now you understand something clearly. You don't have to react to stay in control. In fact, not reacting is often how you keep it. At a certain point, something changes, not suddenly, not dramatically, quietly. You stop focusing so much on what people are doing and start noticing how you respond, not judging it, not forcing it, just seeing it. And the more you see it, the less automatic it becomes, the less control it has over you, and that's where the shift begins. Not in your behavior at first, in your awareness. Because once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. You start recognizing it in real time. That moment, that feeling, that urge. And instead of being pulled into it, you pause. Not because you're trying to control yourself, but because you don't feel the same urgency anymore. It's different now. What used to feel immediate now feels optional. What used to feel necessary now feels questionable. And that changes everything, because now you're not reacting out of habit. You're observing before acting. And in that observation, you start to see something deeper. You start to see yourself differently, not as someone who reacts, but as someone who notices. Someone who notices. And that shift in identity is what changes your behavior long term, because behavior always follows identity. Not the other way around. If you still see yourself as someone who reacts, you will, even if you try not to. But when that identity starts to change, when you start seeing yourself as someone who stays composed, who doesn't move impulsively, who doesn't need to respond to everything, your behavior starts aligning with that. Not perfectly, but consistently. And consistency is what builds identity. Not one moment, not one decision. Many, repeated, until it becomes natural. And once it becomes natural, you stop thinking about it. You don't ask yourself, should I react or not? You already know. You already feel it. You already see the situation clearly. And because of that, you move differently. You respond differently. Or sometimes you don't respond at all. Not out of avoidance, out of clarity, because now you understand something most people don't. Not everything deserves your attention. Not everything deserves your energy. And most importantly, not everything deserves your reaction. And that understanding removes a lot of noise, a lot of unnecessary movement. A lot of situations that used to pull you in don't have the same effect anymore. Not because they changed, because you did, because your identity changed. From reactive to aware, from automatic to intentional. And once that identity becomes stable, people feel it, they notice it, not because you say anything different, because you don't react the same way, you don't give the same signals, you don't respond the way they expect. And that creates distance. Not emotional distance, clarity. You're no longer easy to read in a reactive way. You're no longer predictable in the same pattern. And that changes how people interact with you, because now they don't know exactly how you'll respond. They can't rely on the same triggers. They can't get the same reaction. And that removes something from them. The ability to influence you through emotion. Not completely, but enough. Enough to change the dynamic, because once someone can't trigger you easily, they lose that advantage. They lose that control. And the interaction becomes more balanced, not because you forced it, because you stopped feeding it. And that's where real power comes in. Not power over others, power over yourself. The ability to stay in control, even when something tries to pull you out of it. And that ability is rare, because most people don't build it. Most people stay in the loop, react, justify, repeat. And because of that, they stay predictable. They stay easy to influence. They stay inside the pattern. But once you step out of it, even slightly, you realize something important. You don't need to change others. You don't need to fix situations. You don't need to control everything around you. You only need to control one thing: yourself, your reaction. your response, your attention. And once you do that, everything else adjusts around it. Not perfectly, not instantly, but noticeably, because your behavior changes the interaction, your control changes the dynamic, your awareness changes the outcome, and over time, that becomes your new normal. Not reacting, choosing, not being pulled, staying grounded, not following emotion, but understanding it. And once that becomes your identity, you don't go back. Not because you can't, but because you see too clearly now. You see the pattern. You see the trigger. You see the reaction. And you see what happens when you follow it. And that clarity makes the choice easier. Not always easy, but easier. And that's enough. Because change doesn't require perfection. It requires awareness and repetition. And you have both now. You see it, and you're choosing differently. And that's what changes everything, not in one moment, across many. Until one day, it's no longer something you're trying to do. It's just who you are. At the end of all of this, it becomes clear. Not in a loud way, not in a dramatic way, in a quiet way. The kind of clarity that doesn't need to prove anything. Because now, you see it. Not just your reactions, not just their behavior, the whole dynamic. You see how small moments turn into something bigger. How a single comment, a single look, a single shift in tone can pull you into something that was never really about you. And for a long time you followed it, without questioning, without pausing, without seeing what was actually happening. Because it felt natural, it felt justified, it felt justified. It felt like you had to respond. But now, you don't feel that the same way. That urgency is different. That pressure is weaker. Not gone, but no longer in control. And that changes everything. Because the moment something no longer controls you, you see it for what it is. Not as something you have to react to, but as something you can choose to engage with or ignore. And that choice is where your power is. Not in what you say, not in how you respond, in whether you respond at all. Because now you understand something most people don't. Not every situation deserves your energy. Not every comment deserves your attention. And most importantly, not every moment deserves your reaction. And once you understand that, you stop trying to win every interaction. You stop trying to correct every misunderstanding. You stop trying to prove yourself in moments that don't matter in the long run, because you see the cost. Not just in what happens outside, but in what happens inside. Every reaction takes something. A little bit of your focus, a little bit of your control, a little bit of your clarity. And most people don't notice that. They think it's just a moment, something small, something temporary. But those moments add up. They shape behavior, they shape identity, they shape how you move through situations. And when you stop reacting to everything, you start preserving something, your attention, your energy, your control, and that changes how you experience everything. Not because the world is different, but because you are. You don't get pulled into the same situations, you don't feel the same need to respond, you don't carry the same tension after things happen. Because you're not feeding those moments anymore. You're letting them pass. And that creates space, mental space, emotional space, the kind of space that most people never have because they're constantly reacting, constantly responding, constantly being pulled into something. But you're not. Not the same way. Not anymore. Because now you see it. You see when something is trying to pull you. You see when a comment is more than just a comment. You see when someone is testing, even if they don't realize it themselves. And instead of reacting, you pause, you observe, you choose. And that choice is what keeps you in control. Not perfectly, not every time, but more than before, and that's enough. Because control isn't about perfection, it's about awareness. It's about seeing what's happening before it takes over, and choosing even when it's difficult. And the more you do that, the easier it becomes. the more natural it becomes. Until one day, it's not something you think about anymore. It's just how you move, how you respond, how you exist in situations. Not reactive, not easily pulled, but steady, clear, in control. And people notice that, not because you tell them, because they feel it. They feel the difference in how you respond, in how you carry yourself, in how you don't react the way you used to. And that changes how they interact with you, not because you demanded it, because you became it. Because you stopped giving reactions that gave them control. And once that happens, something shifts, not just in them, in you. You stop feeling the need to engage with everything. You stop taking things as personally. You stop giving weight to moments that don't deserve it. And that freedom is something you can feel, not as excitement, as calm, as stability, as control. And once you feel that, even once, you don't want to go back. Because now you understand something deeper. They didn't want you to react because it meant something. They wanted you to react because it gave them something. Control. And the moment you stop giving that, they lose it. Not completely, but enough. Enough for you to stay in your position. Enough for you to move differently. Enough for you to choose instead of follow. And that's the difference between being influenced and being aware, between reacting and understanding, between losing control and keeping it. And once you see that clearly, you don't need to change anything outside. You don't need to control others. You don't need to fix situations, because the only thing that mattered was always you, your reaction, your response, your choice. And now you have it, not perfectly, but consciously, and that is enough.